The neighborhood was quiet that morning, but Daniel's phone buzzed with a dozen messages at once. "Congrats on the lake, man," one read. Confused, Daniel opened the group chat and nearly dropped his coffee. His own neighbors were congratulating Karen's son for receiving the ranch lake, Daniel's lake, as a gift. Karen, the head of the HOA board, had stood at the monthly meeting the night before and proudly announced, "As a gesture of goodwill, I'm giving my son exclusive use of the lake behind Daniel's ranch." The crowd clapped, but Daniel hadn't been invited, hadn't even been told. He stared out his window at the shimmering water, the same lake his father had left him as part of the ranch. Memories of fishing with his dad, quiet summer evenings, and years of caretaking flashed through his mind. How could anyone dare to gift something that didn't belong to them? Daniel knew Karen's reputation, controlling, entitled. She saw the HOA as her personal kingdom. Most neighbors kept quiet out of fear of fines or drama, but this time, she had gone too far. Daniel clenched his jaw. She thought she owned the community, but she didn't know his biggest secret. He had just been elected treasurer of the HOA, which meant he now controlled the budget. The next afternoon, Karen threw a celebration at the community clubhouse. Streamers hung from the ceiling, tables lined with food, and at the center, her son stood proudly holding a fishing rod like a trophy. Karen tapped her glass, her voice echoing through the room. "Today, I honor my son with the greatest gift. This community has to offer exclusive rights to our ranch lake." Her words dripped with self-importance, as if she had just donated a monument. Neighbors cheered half-heartedly, some clapping more out of fear than excitement. Whispers floated in the back of the room. Everyone knew the lake wasn't hers to give, yet no one dared challenge her, except Daniel. He stood in the doorway, calm but burning inside. He remembered his father's words. "This lake will always be yours, son. It's a piece of our family's soul." Daniel wouldn't let anyone trample that legacy. Karen spotted him and smirked, mistaking his silence for defeat. She raised, her glass higher. "From this day forward, my son can fish, swim, and host parties at the lake without restriction. That's the power of this HOA." The crowd gasped as Daniel finally spoke. His voice was steady, measured, almost cinematic. "Funny thing, Karen. Last I checked, property deeds mean more than your announcements." Karen froze, her smile faltering. For the first time, the room shifted, attention now on Daniel. Karen laughed, a little too loud, trying to brush it off. "Oh, Daniel, don't be difficult. It's just a formality. The lake is part of the community, and as HOA president, I have the authority." But Daniel wasn't playing games. He walked forward, placing a folder on the table. Inside was the deed, stamped, signed, and recorded. His father's name, then his own. "This isn't community land," Daniel said softly. "It's private property. My property." Gasps filled the room. Neighbors leaned closer, murmuring. Karen's confident expression cracked, but she quickly recovered. "You can wave papers around all you want," she sneered. "But everyone here respects me. You'll regret challenging this." Her son crossed his arms, smirking like the lake was already his playground. Daniel locked eyes with him, then back at Karen. "You've run this HOA like it's your kingdom," Daniel said, his voice rising. "But kingdoms fall when they're built on lies." The room went quiet. Even Karen's closest supporters avoided her gaze. That night, Karen made her move. Furious, she dialed the police, reporting that Daniel was blocking community access to shared property. Daniel heard the sirens approaching. He wasn't scared. He was ready. Because Karen didn't know one crucial detail. As HOA treasurer, Daniel controlled every dollar that funded her power. Red and blue lights painted the ranch walls as two officers stepped out of their car. Karen stood proudly at the driveway, arms crossed, her son grinning beside her. "That man is trespassing," On community land, she declared, pointing at Daniel like a villain in a play. Daniel remained calm, deed folder in hand. Officers, this land has never been community property. Here's the proof. Legal, signed, and registered. The officers studied the papers under their flashlights. Karen's smirk wavered, but she quickly raised her voice. He forged those documents. Everyone knows the HOA owns this lake. One officer looked at her unimpressed. Ma'am, property records don't lie, and these are valid. Daniel spoke firmly, not for Karen, but for the neighbors now gathering. Outside. This lake is my family's. My father worked this ranch, paid every tax, cared for this land. It's not a prize for Karen to hand out. Karen's face turned red as whispers rippled through the crowd. For years, she had controlled people with fines, threats, and false rules. But this was the first time someone had stood up to her with undeniable proof. The officers handed the folder back to Daniel. Sir, you're within your rights, ma'am, one officer added sharply. Don't call us again for personal disputes. Karen's jaw dropped. She wasn't used to being dismissed. She muttered something under her breath and stormed off into the night, but Daniel knew this wasn't over. The next morning, Karen doubled down. Emails flew across the community inbox. Daniel is endangering our unity. The HOA will take legal action. She threatened fines, new restrictions, even hinted at raising monthly dues to cover legal expenses. But what Karen forgot was simple. The treasurer signed the checks. Daniel walked into the HOA office that afternoon, nodding politely to the secretary. Karen was inside, already drafting letters on expensive HOA stationery. You can't stop me, she hissed. I'll drain the budget if I have to. My son deserves that lake. Daniel placed a thick binder on her desk. Actually, Karen, you won't drain anything. I reviewed the accounts last night. Without my approval, not a single dollar leaves this office. Not for your letters, not for your parties, not even for your lawn decorations. Her eyes widened. For the first time, she looked powerless. Daniel leaned closer, his voice steady. You built your empire on intimidation, but now, every cent of that empire goes through me. Karen clenched her fists, shaking with fury. She couldn't yell, too many ears listening outside the office. Instead, she whispered, You'll regret this, Daniel. I always win. Daniel simply closed the binder and smiled. Not this time. Days turned into weeks. Without access to HOA funds, Karen's power crumbled. The grand community picnic was canceled. The landscaping crew she loved to brag about stopped showing up. Even the newsletter printer refused to run her announcements without payment. Neighbors began to notice. The whispers changed. Instead of fear, people started asking questions. Why are we paying dues if nothing gets done? Why is Karen still in charge if Daniel holds the budget? Daniel didn't campaign, didn't gossip. He just quietly kept the books straight, transparent, and honest. Soon, neighbors began stopping by his ranch, thanking him for standing up. Some even offered to help clean the lake voluntarily, respecting it as his, but grateful he allowed community use when asked politely. Karen, meanwhile, grew desperate. She tried holding backyard meetings, urging people to stand against Daniel. But fewer and fewer came. Her son stopped showing up altogether, embarrassed by the whispers. Then came the day of the next HOA election. The room was packed, not with fearful silence, but with energy. For the first time in years, people were ready to vote not out of fear, but out of hope. Karen stood at the podium, her voice shaky. She begged for support, claimed she was misunderstood. But the neighbors had seen enough. When the ballots were counted, the results were clear. Karen was out. The sun set gently over the ranch lake, its surface glowing gold. Daniel stood at the water's edge, the same spot where his father once told him, "This land will always protect you as long as you protect it." The community had gathered around, kids skipping stones, families setting up chairs. This time, it wasn't Karen giving orders. It was Daniel, quietly welcoming everyone. "The lake is my family's, yes," he said. "But it's also part of our story together. Respect it, and it will always be here for us." Applause broke out, genuine and warm. Karen was nowhere in sight, her reign finally over. Daniel felt a calm pride. He hadn't just defended his inheritance. He had restored balance to the neighborhood. The fear that once hung heavy over every meeting was gone, replaced by trust and unity. As the evening breeze rippled the water, Daniel closed his eyes for a moment. His father's legacy was safe. And now, it wasn't just his fight. It was the community's strength. The lake shimmered, no longer a prize to be claimed, but a symbol of resilience. And deep down, Daniel knew Karen's biggest mistake wasn't trying to steal the lake. It was forgetting that true power doesn't come from control. It comes from respect.